It's really the companies that are interested in pushing themselves that we tend to work with, right? They're willing to take a chance, willing to take a risk, willing to learn something new. And whether they're scientists or technologists, there's this spirit of experimentation, of let's find out. And those are the ones that I think companies probably care the most about because they show a tangible change. But we can also then measure all of these three things and say, how do they compare to key performance indicators?
You mentioned about sometimes when you first approach companies, you get a bit of pushback from maybe the CFO or whoever you're engaging. I'm wondering what's the thing that gets you over the line that makes them then say, "Well, this is actually going to be useful," or "I would like to try Stir in your company." Um, that's the first question. Second question is. Um, I'd imagine the outcomes will be a little bit difficult to capture. Or should the question be, what kind of things do you then put into the report at the end um, that demonstrates that Stir made a difference in their company?
Great questions. So in the first case, yeah, there's a variety of things that can make the difference. But usually, if we're having a conversation in the first place, sometimes they will come to me, and that's wonderful. Sometimes I'll go to them, and they wouldn't be expecting it, but I'll make a connection. This is why we're coming to you. So I had a student, PhD student, who was interested in responsible financial innovation and interested in responsible innovation in an entrepreneurial setting. Okay, because there hasn't been a lot of work. A lot of the responsible innovation work, by the way, has been in policy or academia, and then only a little bit moving into business. And then even when it does move into business, hardly anything touching startups. Okay, and that's true with corporate social responsibility too, right? Because we think of startups, we'll give them a break. They're just trying to get off the ground. When they get off the ground, then we can ask them out. And so my student, who's got a degree in engineering, industrial engineering, so he understands how companies grow and why they need to be efficient and effective at the same time. So he was really thinking, we've got to figure out whether it's possible to do responsible innovation in a startup. So he approached the startup and he said, look, you know, these are my credentials. These are the research questions I'm trying to work on. This is the tool I want to use with you. If you allow me to work with you, it won't cost you any money. And the time that you put into it, well, chances are you'll get it back in learning and it might help you, in productivity. And so he gave them some examples from the past. And they said, well, okay, we'll give it a try. And so frequently that's in the end what helps companies, right? It's really the companies that are interested in pushing themselves that we tend to work with, right? They're willing to take a chance, willing to take a risk, willing to learn something new. And whether they're scientists or technologists, there's this spirit of experimentation, of let's find out. And so I'll often say, look, I'm going to be 100% transparent with you. If we go through this process and we find out that STIR doesn't work, in your company, in your case, I'll be the first one to tell you that, right? But then I'm going to want to know why it doesn't work. Is that because we need to change the method, or is that because there's something that you need to deal with, and I'm going to put that in your face? And so we kind of make an agreement at the beginning. I'll approach this like a researcher would, right? And I'll be a disinterested observer of the results of my own methods, right? That's why it's collaborative. That's why I can afford to say we work not for the company, but with the company. Okay. So because I'm also working for myself, I'm working either as a researcher or as somebody who's improving the method. Okay. And so I am going to want to understand, when does a method start working? Why does it work? How does it help? Right? Does this theory explain it? Does that organizational dynamic explain it? Let's compare these two different organizational cultures, right? So I really want to learn these things. And so, I have to earn the trust at the beginning to at least give me a chance, or give my students a chance, or my student will make the argument, or my collaborators will make the argument, right? My partners will make the argument. But this is a kind of an important way to make the initial pitch and value proposition, is to cast it in a collaborative mode. So I think that's one of the main reasons why we're able to overcome the initial barriers. But then, of course, once we start the process, as I said, there's that whole, you know, that experience where you start with distrust and resistance, and then it kind of gradually, now we're sailing along. Now we're really collaborating. And then how do we identify outcomes? Well, there are really three main outcomes that we focus on. There are others, um, and I'll include those when I might make an initial presentation. But we focus mostly on learning, values, and what we call adjustments. So learning, that goes along with a lot of what we've said. We just really try to identify opportunities where somebody's mind expanded, right? They realized, oh, they had a mini paradigm shift, right? We try to capture those moments, and we try to capture them with narratives and vivid, and we try to sort of say how, look, they had an opportunity to learn here, but they didn't here, and then here they did. What made the difference? Maybe it was just time. Maybe it was just trust. Maybe it was, they had to realize that the STIR researcher wasn't going to embarrass them or try to make them feel ashamed or try to get into their head and nudge them and change them to do something. And only then did they open up and allow the dialogue process to work. And by the way, dialogue was defined by the great Peter Senge as the flow of meaning through a group. So if I allow meaning to flow between, these two dialogic partners or this group that's having a dialogue, right, or a trialogue or whatever you want to call it, there's got to be trust because you do open up your thinking, your fast thinking machinery, and it could get gummed up if you don't trust the person, right? So we look for opportunities for learning, and when those opportunities were realized, okay, and that in itself, those are big wins. Because they can be identity shifts and it can show that practitioners realize like, wow, I do have a role in this company. It's not just, I wasn't just hired from the neck down. Actually, if I didn't think about these decisions that I was making, the company would be in horrible shape. I have to think about them, and only I know how to think about them in this unique way, right? So that's huge. The second set are values, and this might just be looking for ways in which values are realized, they're elucidated, they're illuminated, where I as a practitioner realize, oh, I guess I've got these two values. I thought I was just working on profitability, but I'm not. I'm also working on, trust, right? And both of these things together are actually part of this project I'm producing. And there might be 15 values, right? So, do values get more clarified? Right? Surface values, because we can start at the beginning of a STIR project and say, okay, what are your values? Let's write them down. Got them. Okay, let's keep going. Or we can interview people and sort of pull out the values, but you're really not going to get all the values unless you go into the fast thinking, tacit, real-time daily practices and you problematizing things then. You say, oh, well, why is that a problem for you? Why is that interesting? Why are you trying to do this at double speed right now when you weren't yesterday? Right? And then we're going to find out other values. So do we clarify the values and illuminate those values? Do the values shift? Are they reprioritized? And what's super exciting, do we get new values? New values that weren't previously articulated, right? Because this is an opportunity for the company to say, oh, do we want to embrace that value? Because it's functioning anyway, or it should be functioning, right? Because half of our workforce wants it, and our customers seem like they would benefit from it. And we kind of hint at it in our mission statement. And then the third type of outcome are what we call adjustments. Now, these could be daily routine practices. Okay, they could be organizational learning and collective change management. Okay, or it could be high level strategic changes. So I'll give you one quick example coming from my student Shivam Zaveri, who conducted the study in the financial innovation startup. And as a result of his STIR project, the company actually changed their publicly stated strategic mission. Okay, they tightened it up, and then they realized we're not implementing this. Right? And so then they actually changed their business. They developed their business strategy in a totally different way in order to take that into account. They changed their business organization. Okay, they changed the reporting structure. And the culmination was when they went for a new market and they identified new target markets. They actually selected one of their target markets based on clear, responsible innovation goals of inclusion. We helped them do what they said they wanted to do, but it required asking questions and thinking about things that they wouldn't have taken the time to think about. It wouldn't have occurred to them. And actually, the first couple of times my student brought this up, the question was batted away. You don't know what you're talking about. We've got that under control. No, you don't understand. We're already doing it. And so my student was trained well to say, well, okay, that's great. Show me how it's working. And they couldn't. And so he kept coming back. Okay, so you're saying that you're doing this and you're doing that. Show me how the two line up because I'm still not seeing it. Right. And there's, oh, you don't, and they would tell them. And they finally basically said, yeah, you're right. They're not lining up because we have these problems. And they pivoted and it rippled through the company. So it's actually a change in the business model, a change in the organization. So this was a series of adjustments. We had high-level strategic adjustments, we had meso-level organizational change management adjustments, and then we had micro-level daily practice adjustments. And those are the ones that I think companies probably care the most about because they show a tangible change. But we can also then measure all of these three things and say, how do they compare to key performance indicators? Right? So I've got a colleague in the Netherlands, Steven Flipsa, who's developed a wonderful tool that allows us to specify KPIs at the beginning. We can take the ones that the company already has, we can introduce new ones, we can develop new ones, and then we can use these to measure before, during, and after and see, are we hitting the targets more? And so we've shown that. And we've also interviewed at the very end innovation managers, and we've asked them, what was the process like? And they said, this measurably improved innovation. So in the end, if we can show productivity bumps and we can get that type of evidence that shows that there was, an enhancement of the metrics that the company cares about in the first place, they're going to be happy about that. They're not going to care about learning values and adjustments. They're just going to care what's the bottom line here. And so we try to come as close as we can to those.
Have there been any stats so far about how STIR RI is translating to financial performance? Or is that still in the
No
works?
official stats, no. There's tantalizing hints speaking to individuals. So one of the studies that FLIPSA conducted, possibly several of them, you can look at what the participants are saying. And I believe one of them specifically had economic promise or economic potential as one of the KPIs. And I think that improved. And we had a control group, right? We had 5 innovation managers that used the STIR methodology and 5 of them who did not. And we had them all at the very beginning, in the middle, and at the end fill out the same battery of questions, self-assessment questions. And so the ones that didn't use STIR were at this level, and the ones that did use STIR had higher scores. And I believe economic potential was one of those higher scores. So that's about as close as we've come. It's just individuals giving their sense of how it's going. But it would be great to bring in, I think I would need additional team members to come in and actually measure and to know we'd have to measure before and then measure afterwards. And we probably have to have a timeline of 6 months later. But it's, as you know, it's very difficult to trace, unless you've got an individual product line and it's got its own ledger and you've got an individual product team and you can draw a straight line, right? It would be great to do that kind of study, but we haven't done that.
Yeah. Yet.
Not yet, right? In the future, we will.
I think it's important to say STIR is very much, we started out in the labs, now it's steadily moving towards business. So a lot of research is still underway, but the initial stats are quite promising. So just want to mention that.